This is a Honda Odyssey, the most popular minivan in America in 2021. If you bought this car in the US, the retail price would be 37,340 US dollars. But if you bought the same car in Singapore, the price would be 226,999 Singaporean dollars or 163,801 US dollars. This is a 2013 Lamborghini Gallardo Spider with 9,000 miles on it, and according to this listing, it is also 160,000 US dollars in the US. So why is a car in Singapore nearly 5 times more expensive than the exact same car in America? Well, the short answer is taxes and fees, but there's more to the story than just that. To understand why the taxes are so high, you need to understand a little bit about Singapore. This is Singapore, and well, as you can see, Singapore is tiny, but it's not just tiny. This tiny island has a population of 5.6 million, 500,000 more people than New Zealand, while being 374 times smaller. To support such a high population density, around 8,358 people per square mile, Singapore had to plan their city incredibly well just so people were able to get around without having to wait for hours in traffic. They had two options. Either they could build massive roads or they could build underground transport. Obviously, since they barely have any space on their island and they need the space for really important things like massive malls and casinos, they decided to build an underground subway system. The Mass Rapid Transit System, aka the MRT, is what they came up with. This system connects most of the island, with buses in between to transport people where the trains can't go. And because buses and trains reach each stop around every 6 minutes or so, residents of Singapore are easily able to travel across the city in a relatively short period of time. But just having a good and cheap transport system and high traffic doesn't really explain car prices. Take London, for example. It has a good transit system and lots of traffic, but cars are only slightly more expensive than in the US. To understand why the price in Singapore is so much higher, you need to understand what determines the price of a car in Singapore. There are six different factors. First, of course, is the car's open market value. Basically, the retail price plus whatever it costs to bring the car and sell it in Singapore. Then there's the ARF. The additional registration fee is based on the open market value from earlier. Basically, it's a fee where you pay more depending on how much the vehicle costs. Here is a table showing how the ARF works, and as you can see, it's totally absurd. The ARF costs at least as much as the car itself, if not a whole lot more. Next is the excise tax and the GST. The excise tax is a tax for specific types of goods. For example, some countries might levy an excise tax on cigarettes to discourage their citizens from purchasing them. And Singapore definitely wants to discourage a high number of cars as they don't want traffic jams all the time and they need to keep people spending money on public transport so that it can have enough funding to keep it working as well as it is. It's a positive feedback loop which is working well for Singapore. Back to the excise tax though. In Singapore, the excise tax for cars is 20% of the open market value, and the goods and services tax, the GST, is 7% of the open market value and the excise tax combined. And this GST will increase to 8 and 9% in 2023 and 2024, respectively, making cars more expensive in the future. Next is the Vehicular Emission Scheme. Basically, the VES is there to encourage people to buy cars that emit fewer pollutants. Here's a table that shows the VES fees. If your car pollutes a lot, you have to pay an additional fee when paying your ARF, but if it pollutes less than a threshold, then you pay nothing extra or you even get a discount on your ARF. Obviously, the car dealership has to make money, so there's the factor of the company's profit. And the last factor is the certificate of entitlement. The COE is how Singapore controls how many cars there can be at any given time. Twice a month, the Transit Authority of Singapore announces the quotas for vehicles in each of its four categories, which are separated based on type of vehicle and its engine power. The day after the quote reveal, you can bid to buy a COE for the vehicle you want. Then you can buy the vehicle and register it. Since you have to bid for a COE against other people, its price is based on demand. And since Singapore has a lot of rich people, this price for the CLEs can become very expensive. In September 2022, the most expensive COE for cars above 130 horsepower was $113,000. Standard COEs last for 10 years, or you can pay half and keep the COE for 5 years. But you can't renew the vehicle's COE after the 5 years unless it's a goods vehicle, which then you can. After the 10-year standard, you can renew the COE, but if the vehicle passes its statutory lifespan or you don't want to renew the COE, it will be deregistered and you have to scrap the car. As you can see, buying a car in Singapore is expensive and complicated, which is probably why it's not worth it for most people. And this is actually a good thing. Not having as many cars and using a lot of public transport is better for the environment and the traffic. Not many Singaporeans are even complaining about this situation either, so there's really no need for much change, but there are some problems. For example, there's no rebates or reduced fees for the elderly or disabled. Some less wealthy families who can't afford to buy a car because of the incredible extra charges, but need one to help their elderly or disabled family, just can't get one. And because Singapore doesn't really care how many cars a single person owns, it just becomes even harder for the people who can't afford a car, as the rich buy several cars and use up the COE quotas. The people struggling could use the taxi system in Singapore, which is regulated to ensure taxis are always cheap, but some people are just not comfortable in a taxi or it's hard for them to get into a taxi, so they'll still continue having problems. So, while Singapore's system is incredibly efficient, environmentally beneficial, and well connected, like most things in life, it has some downsides. If you enjoyed this video, like and subscribe to be served up more videos about random, somewhat interesting facts by the YouTube algorithm made by me. Thanks and have a wonderful day.